Welcome back to Highly Respected. I'm your host, Scott Greer. And today we're going to have another fantastic episode, just like always. And so all the topics today are going to be based on questions we got from the Cognitive Elite. So I'm going to give my pitch at the beginning. As a reminder, you too can get the power to ask me questions or suggest guests and topics if you sign up for the Cognitive Elite option at Highly Respected Substack. And for just less than $16 a month, you get the power to ask me an unlimited amount of questions and suggest whatever guests and topics you would like. And that is at Highly Respected Substack, and that's at highly-respected.com. And make sure to sign up for the not the Cognitive Elite, but the IQ supplements and mailbag while you're there. So the first question we got is from none other than K-Max. K-Max has got a few questions today. K-Max asks, and this is our general topic we're going to have for today. He's asking about Fox News post Tucker Carlson. While some still consider Fox News to be legacy of media along with CNN and MSNBC, do you feel they have been changed now away from their old ways? My dad would watch Bill O'Reilly, and rarely, if ever, did he mention race or white people or legal immigration. Has there been a shift to at least a soft white identity politics? The primetime lineup now of Jesse Waters, Sean Hannity, and Gutfeld has now shifted. Or other shows now that have shifted? Is Fox News still the main driver of how the Republican Party acts, or has online media changed that? And he sent a clip of Bill O'Reilly attacking David Duke below, which, I mean, he would always do that. But Bill O'Reilly, there's a few things. I got to go into the Bill O'Reilly and my thoughts on that. But on the thing, this is based on a tweet I had with watching recently Fox News and what they're covering. Now, I grew up watching Fox News like a lot of our listeners, and I remember back in the day, the 2000s, it was all about defending George W. Bush and talking about how great the Iraq War is going and how liberals are outrageous for attacking our dear leader George W. Bush and that. Then I remember the Tea Party days, and it's like, they're spending way too much money. We got to cut down the size of government. And this is what they talked about. And then when, Trump was in office, they just talked about his tax cuts and other things. And they tried to put a nice face, respectable Republican face on Trump. So that's always how, and Fox has had an uneasy relationship with Tucker as well, but with Trump. But they've always had to submit to the will of Trump. And they've tried to get rid of Trump multiple times. In 2016, Roger Ailes at one point, we saw he was attacking Megyn Kelly. He's like, this has gone on long enough. We're going to attack him. Obviously, Trump won and defeated Fox News. Then during his presidency, they felt he was like too much and they might move on. And you could see this after the 2020 election when they were eager to call it for Biden, even more so than the other networks. And they were quickly moving on, and they also dismissed the Stop the Steal stuff. They're ready to get rid of Trump. And once he left office, they were actively trying to move away from Trump, and they were eager to promote any other person who was Trump. I remember watching it after the midterms, and they were shilling for Mike Pompeo, not just like DeSantis, but just anyone not named Trump. So Pompeo, Pence, Tim Scott, of course, Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis, they were giving a lot more positive attention towards rather than Trump. And so that's what they were shifting towards. Now, Tucker Carlson was still on the air at that time, and he was the face of the network, and what he was talking about is what the network cared about. But the rest of the network was on its own little planet. Tucker would attack Ukraine, while the rest of the network is like, we need to stand by Ukraine 100%. Tucker would talk about the Great Replacement, and then they'd get people on like, we need more legal immigration. This is type of how the network was. Tucker leaves. And I think due to the fact of how Trump and how the rest of what right-wingers now care about, and a lot of it is much more influenced by online media. If you watch the network now, it is all about, for the last week, it's all been about Daniel Penny and how he's a victim of the criminal justice system and how he is a hero and a good Samaritan, and he did absolutely nothing wrong in taking down a violent black criminal on a New York subway train. They're all defending Daniel Penny, and then they just talk about illegal immigrant crime. They had wall-to-wall coverage of the Lake and Riley trial. They will, if ICE arrests like a single migrant rapist anywhere in the country, they will talk about it. If there's a migrant who commits a murder, they give a ton of attention towards it. So now there's still some silly things on it. Like they have talked nonstop about the Jaguar. They always say Jaguar, not Jaguar. Jaguar car ad, which I don't know why there's so much anger over it, because I mean, it's a weird ad, but compared to some of the woke stuff, I don't, maybe there's a transgender model in it. One of the models I think I'm pretty sure is a transgender. I tried to look it up. I think news outlets try to skirt around it, but it is a weird ad and has nothing to do with cars. They have talked about it nonstop as well. And I'm like, this is probably not that important. It is going back to some of my complaints that, like, you know, when people are ever talking about starting a civil war in 2021 or 2022, it's like, don't expect people to actually fight a war over Mr. Potato Head going gender neutral. This is kind of one of the petty complaints about woke with the Jaguar ad. It's similar to Bud Light, but it's whatever. But the real meat and focus is Daniel Penny and illegal immigrant crime. And so if you're an average boomer watching this stuff, you are much more concerned with the real issues, with the identity issues, than you would have been if you're watching Fox News circa 2010. You know, Obama's just in office. You know, it's clearly a important moment in the decline of white America to have Barack Hussein Obama as the president, and they're just worried about his tax policies and regulations and stuff like that. Now, with Trump coming to office, and the average Fox News viewer now is supporting mass deportations. Every segment is talking about how awesome mass deportations are, and they need to happen ASAP, and that white Marine heroes should be celebrated, not charged with a crime if they take down black criminals. So that is the message that Fox News viewers are receiving, and that is what they're indulging. And so I've even talked to family members, you know, who are big Fox News fans and listen to talk radio, and they've definitely adopted a much more anti-immigration view than I could ever remember. And this is, you know, all these people, you know, they'd never really talked about it that much, but, you know, I'm hearing from relatives who are, you know, they're going to car shows and they're wondering why are all these immigrants there, or they're going to the grocery store and they're really upset about how no one's speaking English. And I think they're able to recognize these issues because the media they consume is much more tuned to the identity issues than they would have been 10 or 15 years ago. And so I think even though Tucker is no longer there, and they don't quite have a host that is as good as Tucker. They don't. I mean, Jesse Waters is a lightweight. If you guys remember my article from last year when Tucker was fired and Jesse Waters, and I wrote that Fox News would not suffer a backlash from Tucker leaving, and they didn't. Jesse Waters has very high ratings. They didn't suffer much of a decline from Tucker leaving at all, because I always would say this, and I made this point, is that as long as they have someone semi-talented in those slots, people will watch it. People are more loyal to the Fox brand than they are to the individual personalities. And this is something different from a lot of online media. You know, the Daily Wire and the Blaze cannot replace, more so Daily Wire than the Blaze. They cannot, it's tough for them to find a replacement for someone else leaves. Like, even if, like in the Candace Owens situation, there's not like another Candace Owens in the wings. Like, people are loyal more to Owens, the personality, than they are to the Daily Wire brand. That is the opposite case with Fox News, where they're more loyal to that brand than they are to the individual personality. And so those people who were watching Tucker a year ago, or year and a half ago rather, are still watching that 8 p.m. slot with Jesse Waters, even though Jesse Waters is inferior. But Jesse Waters is a different tone to it. Tucker has had this apocalyptic tone of what is happening in the world. It's like everything is turning into a nightmare. Things are dire. Like it's only a few minutes till midnight, and we have to do something about this. Jesse Waters is much more lighthearted. It's not saying like the end is nigh. Instead, it's like, look at these woke idiots. Let's sit and laugh at them and know that. And when you're sitting and laughing at them, instead of viewing them as a dire threat to your civilization, you are assuming that everything is ultimately okay, but we have a few problems here and there that the best response to is mockery. While Tucker views that there is something deeply wrong with our civilization, and it could all blow up at any moment now. Very different tone from Jesse Waters. Jesse Waters is on the complete opposite end of the spectrum from the apocalypticism of Tucker. And so and the network still has that. The network is not, well, as they should be right now with Trump going in. They should be more optimistic and white pilled, but they are not having that tone with Tucker. I don't think that with Tucker there. It was better because he was delivering a dissident right message in a more coherent, articulate fashion than anyone on Fox News can. But I feel like the rest of the network has adopted a moderate form of the identity issues that we care about, and they are getting the boomers much more interested in these topics than they would have been years ago. So it is a positive development when you're watching Fox. And it is still extremely important to what the Republican Party is doing. It impacts what the Republican Party does more than it ever has. Because Trump's cabinet is literally Fox News TV lineup, okay? Everyone he's picking are people who have been on Fox News frequently. And that's like who he's getting to go on his thing. I mean, he literally has a Fox News host as one of his major cabinet picks. Okay? That has never happened before in Fox. And it is Fox News, the cabinet. Fox News is also enthralled with his cabinet. They're just like, this is an incredible pick. This is a genius pick. No matter who he is. Like, he could pick a ham sandwich for, Secretary of Treasury, and they would think that this is the greatest pick on human history. So they're totally on board with this. But it is like Fox News, the cabinet, this time around. And they certainly impact how Republican Party politics operate. Because what is said on Fox News, Republican congressmen pay attention to that a lot more than what's said on Twitter. Because Twitter is X is its own little space. And online media does have more impact. And I think Fox News is more reliant on online media. Well, I don't think I know. They are more reliant on online media for inspiration and content generation than they've been in the past. But at the same time, when directed in the real world, Fox News is much more important than online new media. Because I've been seeing, I was, reading something, from Twitter or an article, and someone is saying that people who listen and follow traditional news media don't know what's going on. In order to know what's going on, they have to follow X in online media. And I'm more skeptical of that claim because I feel that people who listen to mainstream media have a greater idea of what ordinary people are knowing and understanding versus online media. Because people on online media, what they're talking about is almost completely different from the lived experiences of normal Americans. And I think the important thing about online media is it informs them about topics they wouldn't otherwise know from traditional media. So it is important to waking up people. But in terms of knowing what's going on in America, almost I would say in a lot of cases, traditional media is a better source for understanding that than online media. Because online media, you go on over the weekend, I'm having to deal with people who are still claiming we're going to have collapse in the next few months. And I'm just like, this is like the average online media person. Online media person, a lot of their news consumption, if they're normies and they're getting red pilled by this stuff, their brains just break and they can't handle this information, and they view what they see online as real world, and they forget that a lot of it is just fantasy land. And so, if you're reading online media stuff or certain other sources, you think civil war is about to break out. And, well, if you read traditional news media, you would know that that's not the case. So it depends on the situation. I don't want to say it's more correct in all situations. I would say, on COVID, online media was way better. The new media was way better. On even what's going on in Ukraine, a lot of ways, online media has been better. So it depends on the situation. But I think on almost if you're wanting to understand what's going on in the country, like domestically, if about the state of mind of people and how they're thinking, you really have to interact with traditional media because you might think like, oh, people are waking up to this niche concern and they're about to have a civil war, and then you go and look at the CNN main page and you're like, I don't think people are on that wavelength. And so it's important for the right to understand what Fox News and talk radio is talking about, because that is what the average conservative is thinking and understanding about the world versus popular Twitter anon. The Twitter anon does not reflect the views of the ordinary conservative. Fox News and talk radio do. So that's why it's important to understand what Fox News is talking and saying about. And so you can solve this issue just by going to the Fox News main page, in the morning and just seeing what's going on there. So Fox News is still very important for, shaping the views of the ordinary Republicans and conservatives, much more so than online media, but it's also online media is more impacting it because Fox News draws from it. Fox News talks about Elon Musk tweets all the time and that type of matter. But I also think for a lot of our side that they mistake, an anon getting like 20,000 likes and then or something like that, and then imagining that this is reaching normal Americans, and then a lot of those are bots, a lot of those are foreigners, and people mistake what goes viral on X and think that's what is impacting people, but that's not true. What you really should understand by what's impacting people is going to watching Fox News for an hour and seeing what news topics they're talking about, and then you realize what news and information is reaching out into normie Republican America. So that's something. Now on the white identity politics, I would not say this is like soft white identity politics. It's a lot more into the state of maybe multiracial nativism as I'm starting to develop this concept. They don't talk about it in a blunt way that Bill O'Reilly would talk about. And I'll go into Bill O'Reilly. Bill O'Reilly would say very blunt things about race that even Tucker wouldn't quite say in the same way. Like he will just say, like, blacks hate white people. Or he'd say like this is extremely anti-white. Or if he was noticing a case like going on with Trayvon or something, he would be like the only reason they like this is because it's a black kid. He would say these like very blunt things that are impolite to say. And for younger generations, they know not to say that openly on a news network. And even his stuff, like he was very anti-rap music. In a very Greer head pledge manner, which they don't have Eddie host who would crack down on rap. I noticed one thing is that they don't play rap music when they exit segments. They always stick to rock or oldies. They do play an interesting rock and oldies, especially if Gutfeld is, because there was one segment I was watching, I think it's Fox and Friends, and they switched to Misfits We Are 138, which I was like, that's an interesting choice for a news network. But they don't play rap music because they think they know that their boomer audience gets, they'll put up with Misfits, but they will not put up with rap music. So, but they still won't have anyone to attack rap music like Bill O'Reilly did. I think it's more that it just makes their audience aware of these issues and makes them much more critical of legal immigration, much more critical of black mythology and black worship than a lot of other mainstream media outlets. And it's still succeeding. Unlike CNN and MSNBC, MSNBC may be over in the following year. It may just end. It's like Comcast is selling it off. Whoever buys it, they might shut it down completely revamp it. Who knows? And CNN is about to have a massive layoffs where even a lot of the most popular hosts may be axed. So they're all struggling while Fox News is succeeding. And they have deep brand loyalty among their audience. The final thing I will say about my thoughts on Fox News is it's much more religious than I remember. growing up. They would have like, we need to stand up for Christmas. They were really Bill O'Reilly was very into war on Christmas, and they would talk about the Judeo-Christian heritage. But there's a lot more just direct religious program. Because this is very funny in light of there are people claiming that Tucker Carlson was fired for being a devout Christian and like giving a speech about Christianity and faith and spiritual warfare. And any person who actually watches Fox would realize how ridiculous that is. I'm not saying like Tucker was fired for legitimate reasons. Tucker was fired for stupid reasons, and it was done for a lot of their legal problems that they were having, and they felt that Tucker was a liability, which they should have stood by him. And it was bad that they got rid of him, but I'm just saying that some of the reasons why is like he was a devout Christian was the most ridiculous. If you pretty much the majority of Fox Nation programming, which is their premium streaming channel, is religious programming. They are having this whole series on the martyrs and or saints rather, and they have a lot of other biblical stuff that's on their network. And also most of the advertising is now religious themed. They have like a lot of ads for prayer apps or going to visit Noah's Ark museum and this type of manner. It wasn't as religious as I imagine. Now it might just be that the advertising you get through YouTube or the streaming services that you now watch it through is much more religious than it was when you're watching on a traditional cable package. That could be the case. But at the same time, I think but this programming itself is much more religious. Even the hosts have like a much more aggressive religious posture than I remember 10 or 15 years ago, which is interesting because the country is becoming more secular. But I think that their audience now sees religiosity as much more of just even more conservative coded than it was maybe 20 years ago. And they're clinging more to it, and it's also much more of what their audience wants to hear, and more a part of their audience's culture than it would have been in the past. So that is something I noticed as well. So the main reason I thought that was interesting was just people being like, Fox News doesn't want people giving Christian themed speeches and stuff, and it's like if you watch Fox News, you would realize how stupid that is. Like they pretty much every host, maybe except for Gutfeld and for a few others, will give like a religious, dialogue and talk about their faith very openly on air. And Fox Nation is mostly religious programming. So that's my views. I think it is a positive development what's going on with Fox News, and it reflects where the audience is. I think it's also that audience has been pushed in that direction. It's been prepared in that direction by Trump and also Tucker, but it's staying in a much more America First direction than it was before. I mean, it's not completely shifted on foreign policy. They're all over the place on Ukraine. Boomers generally want us to stop funding Ukraine. I feel like that's now the mainstream conservative position, which is completely different from how it was 2 years ago. They have not begun questioning Israel at all, which is not surprising. But they are in a different position than they were when I was growing up. And I think this is positive, and it just shows the shifting nature of the Republican constituency and how they're much more open to our views than they've ever been in the past. And I've always been pro-conservative media. I think without conservative media, America would be in a lot worse situation. We always view as conservative media as a safety valve, and it's diluting the people. But in Europe, they wish they had Fox News. They wish they had this stuff. And it's also like they had worse COVID restrictions and a lot more insanity in Europe because they don't have strong conservative media. If you talk to any European, they wish they had Fox News. Any European nationalists. And due to the fact that we have conservative media, it has stopped the amnesties both in 2006, 2007, and then in 2013. It helped elect Trump. Trump would have never been elected without conservative media, even though online conservative media was very opposed to him. Talk radio and Fox were much more supportive of him, especially talk radio, because they realized their audience was prepared for him. And without conservative media, that he would have never gotten anywhere as far. It's also helped us question narratives, which in the 60s and 70s would have been unquestionably accepted by everyone, which now, thanks to conservative media, there's someone questioning it and challenging it. You know, if you guys listen to my Barry Goldwater podcast recently, IQ supplement, you know, I talked about how they were able to make up all these lies about Goldwater and it was never challenged. Now, with conservative media, when the media is like, oh yeah, Goldwater seemed to be sympathetic to JFK's assassination, there'd be, you know, conservative media would be like, how outrageous this is, and then that mainstream media outlet would have to apologize for it. And, you know, we can complain it doesn't go far enough, but America would be in a much worse position without talk radio, without Fox News. In spite of the cringe aspects about it, you have to really appreciate them. But that's a topic for probably an IQ supplement or another highly respected episode. So those are my thoughts on the evolution of Fox News. So we're going to move on to other questions from K Max. He's got a question about the Matt Gaetz resignation. I think I got another question about that from another person. Yeah, Flores also asked about this. So I'll just combine this question. So K-Max is just asking, you know, his resignation, just your thoughts about whether this was predictable or unexpected. How saddened are you by the news? In your view, will this continue to happen with Trump's picks? And Flores asked, also in regards to Matt Gaetz withdrawing, do you think any of the GOP senators who are arguably responsible for him being unable to get confirmed will face any serious threats of being ousted in primaries? So whether I think this is bad, I think it's bad. Pam Bondi is not horrible, but Gaetz was a lot better. But it's not surprising. There was no way he could get confirmed. Like, Washington, D.C. hates Gaetz. You know, what he's been accused of is, I think, less severe than some of the stuff surrounding RFK and Hedgeth, because both Hedgeth and RFK have been accused of sexual assault, which Gaetz was just accused of, you know, not assault, but tawdry actions. We'll just say that. The difference between Hedgeth, you know, Republican senators have no problem with his views. They have no problem with his views. They have a problem with Gaetz as a person. They felt he really pissed off a lot of Republican leaders when he was in Congress, and they deeply hate him. And they didn't care about the accusations. They just hate Gaetz. And so it was always going to be difficult to get Gaetz confirmed simply by how much Congress hated him. Both senators and Republican and congressmen. So it was just not possible to get him through. And they didn't want to have Congress recess to get Gaetz appointed. They would have never done that. And on the question of them being punished, no, they're not going to be punished. First off, it's not going to be publicly. First off, it was like the majority of Republican senators. They're not going to primary every senator. They're not going to primary every congressman who hates Gaetz. Gaetz has his issues, and it's what it is. Now, do I think this is going to continue happening with Trump's picks? No, I think the fact that Gaetz withdrew, and this is the person they most hated, because I think they were trying to... I don't know if there was truly 4D chess here. There may have been a little bit of that, but I think they suggested like those four people and seeing which one they hated the most. And then they withdrew that, so then they would support the other three, because the four that they're going to have most difficulty are Hedgeth, they don't even need to do a recess appointment for. He will be confirmed by the Senate regardless of his divorces and, you know, lack of experience and allegations of sexual misconduct. He's going to easily be supported, because it's also the Fox News effect. Fox News thinks he's awesome. He's a Fox News host. Having a Republican senator oppose a Fox News host being appointed to a veteran, no less, is going to really piss off Fox News, and so they can push him. And also, the average Republican conservative base loves him for him being a Fox and Friends host. They're not gonna oppose him. So that's that. And then his, Tulsi Gabbard, they oppose her politically. You know, with Hedgeth, they don't really oppose him for any real reasons. I mean, they'll like, well, we don't really like his behavior. Maybe he doesn't have the experience, but whatever. We're fine with him politically. You know, they don't really mind him going after DEI in the military. You know, they know he's a veteran. his foreign policy views are all over the place, but it's not like somebody who's going to take down the military industrial complex or, be a non-interventionist. All those policies are going to be set by the president, not really by Hedgeseth. So it's whatever. Republicans don't really have a problem with politically. Tulsi, they have a problem with her politically, but not personally. And RFK, they don't really care that much about what he might do. I mean, it's not like Republicans are like, we really love vaccines or whatever he would want to do at HHS. They're not as ideologically committed to, foreign policy, to vaccines as they are to foreign policy hawkishness. So they don't really have as strong of a reason to oppose RFK. There could be a pro-life effort to scuttle his nomination because they view him as pro-choice, but once again, HHS isn't going to set policy on abortion. That's set by the states. So I don't know if there's going to be that. I think now the hardest to get through is going to be, it's tough between RFK and Tulsi. There's RFK personal problems, and maybe Republicans get a little bit worried about what he might try to do. And versus Tulsi, they view her as an Assad shill and, as a hostile to their preference in foreign policy. But I think with Gaetz dropping out, their chances of confirmation increase because Trump threw a bone to the Senate and it's like, look, I took out the guy you most opposed. How about you approve these other people? And so that's that. So I think it's disappointing that Gaetz was not the guy. He would have been great at DOJ. I think it was Trump's best pick, just politically. But I think I was like, when they first picked him, I'm like, how the hell is he going to get confirmed? I was extremely skeptical he would ever get confirmed when they picked him. And I think them finally interacting with senators realized like, oh yeah, this is never going to happen. So I hope Gaetz stays involved in politics. He's an extremely talented politician. He's solid on all the issues. He's made a few not so wise decisions, but I'm a Gaetz fan, so hopefully he stays around. Maybe he runs for the Senate. For Rubio's seat that I think will be up for a special election in 2026. I don't know how it works in Florida. Sometimes in states it's they appoint and then they have a special election that year of the vacancy. They did that in Alabama in 2017. Other times they wait till the regular election 2 years later. So hopefully he runs for the Senate or runs for his old seat and stays involved in politics. It might be hard for him to win a seat with, what his affairs and stuff. But, Trump was able to overcome this. RFK wasn't really sunk by his sexual misconduct allegations. So I don't really know. We'll see. But I hopefully he does something, continues in politics. So those are asking those questions. Let's see what else we got. We've got a question from, let's see this guy's pseudonym. He might have forgot his pseudonym. Augsburg. It's Augsburg. Okay. Augsburg asks, the Delaware at-large congressional district has elected the first trans-identified member of the U.S. Congress, Sarah, quotation marks, McBride. His election has caused Nancy Mace to lead the charge for Republicans to block him from using the women's bathrooms. She tweeted something the other day that I think represents everything I can't stand about conservative women like Mace. She said something to the effect of, I'm so confused. I broke a glass ceiling 25 years ago by graduating from an all-male military college, and I was applauded. And now men are trying to invade female-only spaces. The left has gone insane. She really doesn't see the irony that she just admitted to invading a male-only space in the Citadel. This is the kind of we're the real feminist mentality that is so pervasive in the trans issue. It used to be that the trans exclusionary radical feminist TERFs were the main factions who appealed to safe spaces for women against the so-called trans women. Because the TERF faction seems completely irrelevant now, have normie conservatives taken their place? Am I wrong for being annoyed that the only argument normie cons seem to be used against the trans issue is they're invading our sacred female-only spaces? Think of the poor woman. Well, Nancy Mace is in a category by herself. K-Max is not going to like this. K-Max is, we're not insulting K-Max, but K-Max really likes Nancy Mace, which I like her for the content. I with a lot of these Republican congresswomen, I have a complicated relationship with. Because, on one hand, I think they're clowns. At the same time, they really entertain me. It's like Boebert. Boebert, you guys know I'm a proud Bobby. Or more an ironic Bobby. Boebert is definitely the ultimate insane clown party Republican, but she is wildly entertaining. I love her new adventures that she goes on. And I same with Nancy Mace. Mace is, this is a very impressive thing, but she is the horniest lawmaker in Congress by far. Like, this woman is insanely sexually like obsessed, and her she's also a major attention seeker, and so this is just part of it. I don't know. I just kind of take it with the content. Some people were really upset about it. It's like, she doesn't understand that this is the first thing that leads to it. That is true. But it's also trying to appeal to normies. I mean, the only people who are going to fully get the irony of that or see the conflict are people online. Well, for a lot of people, they're like, oh, that's awesome. You were a military cadet and fully served in that regard. So she didn't join the military after being a cadet, which some for Citadel and VMI, that is a lot of the military academies that are not the major ones. That is the case. You don't have to go and serve after your 4 years. But they're going to respect that for her being a veteran. It is true that she has invaded male-only spaces. Well, for her reason was different than Sarah McBride. Hers is like she really likes being around men. Instead of Sarah McBride, is... Well, I don't know. She might have a similar reason for being around in the women's bathroom, but I think it is. But with the real feminist, I don't. The difference between the thing that most upsets me is not the Mace stuff, because Mace, she loves men too much, which I think is better than a lot of the conservative feminist mentality. Because I see this a lot of among the trads. If you guys have ever listened to my podcast about my complaints about conservative femcells and this type of stuff, and a lot of these women absolutely hate men. They hate men more than feminists do, which that's different from Mace. Mace is just simply saying, like, it's more standard. It's like, we've got to protect Title IX. We've got to protect women's sports, which, in the past, conservatives were hostile to Title IX because they saw this as a politically correct imposition that was destroying, that was unfairly favoring women in college, because a lot of women, one of the reasons that women are now found in colleges, this is a small reason, but it's contributed, is that they are more likely to get scholarships than men if they're an athlete, because all these colleges that have these big football and basketball programs, they have to also provide for female sports. And, so they're desperate to find female athletes. So like, oh, we need our women's rowing team in order to have parity among the genders. So if they have a football team, that's a lot of athletes. So they have to make up for it by having a lot of women's sports, and then so they'll give these scholarships to these women athletes to get them to come to school. This is a very small reason. I mean, it's like covering not that many students, but it's also an unfair advantage for a lot of these women. And there was a lot of conservative concern over this, because there had been a lot of guys who were incredible athletes in a sport that a school had to cut because of Title IX, and then these girls who just like took up rowing like a few months ago and aren't very good at it, they got a full scholarship to the school because they needed to make up, have that equality with their football program. So, but now conservatives have shifted and like protect Title IX is now a conservative issue because it's about keeping out trans stuff. Now, it appears it sort of worked in the 2024 election. I've been skeptical about it working before because Michigan Republicans ran on this issue in 2022 and they got blown out in the midterms. Now this year Republicans ran a lot on the trans stuff, and it did help them. And I think it convinced a number of white women to vote for Republicans because they really don't like the idea of their daughters having to share a bathroom with some weird male sex freak, and so there's that. I have my own problems and qualms with that. And I think as a larger point, I do think it's not as good that we're now shifting to protect Title IX versus abolish Title IX. I think that's a negative, but I understand that it works among normal people, and the women who are into this stuff are not anti-man. They are cringe. They're a type of feminist, but they're not anti-men. My real problem is with the conservative femcells who are extremely anti-men, and you will interact with this a lot online. And these are the women who are like, if a guy has ever looked at porn before, I will never even talk to him. That this is like the thing. Not that I'm defending porn, but it's like we're in a society where you're eventually, a guy may have realized it was wrong and he got over it, or guys, it's everywhere. So guys eventually gonna see that, but they're just like, this isn't there, or like guys like exhibiting any type of traditional male behavior is just bad, and they hate men. They like want to abolish men from having hobbies like that aren't centered around women. They don't want to have men playing video games or having male-only spaces. They really want to turn men into these neutered church mice. And the conservative femcells truly, truly hate men more than feminists. And I think this is different from Mace. And I view them as worse than Mace because they shape a lot of the conservative intellectual climate. All this stuff about good men scarcity and where are the good men, this is shaped by these bitter conservative femcells who hate men for being who they are. And they want to turn men into something that they're not. And a big reason why these women end up marrying gay men is because they finally find the type of guy they want. It's like, wow, this guy never ogles at women. He has all the same hobbies as me. He's not crude or vulgar. Oh, he's just terrific. We even talk about how like handsome all the men are. It's great. And they always end up with these gay men because those gay men are more likely to reject their inner masculinity, while these women have this deep aversion, even though they want like a Matthew McConaughey or one of these big time actors and that traditional masculinity of the cowboy, being strong and stern, but the type of behavior and the type of traits that man would have deeply repulses them. They really want like a hardened cowboy who is a complete, footstool for them, which that guy would never be. But a gay man would be for them. So they just don't understand what those type of men are like. And then if they actually interact with those real guys, they're there. And I think that's much more annoying to me, and I think it shapes a lot of this gender war discourse online, which even conservative femcells are into, because there's all these women who just like trash and attack men for every little damn thing that they do, and that they're losers and betas, and that they don't deserve them. And these are the type of women who demand that men like fight anyone, take action against other men threatening them on a train, but then will condemn these men for doing so. So I think that's a bigger problem than more the Nancy Mace stuff. The Nancy Mace stuff is stuff you actually see in the real world, while the conservative femcel anti-man stuff is just stuff you see in the online space and in conservative spaces, which is more of a niche subculture thing. But I think that they're much more toxic and much worse than Nancy Mace, in my opinion. I do think it's unfortunate the development of the Maceism, we'll call it Maceism, but it does work politically. I think it did help Republicans in 2024. I'd much rather abolish Title IX than protect it, but if it helps us win over conservative, or not conservative, but suburban housewives and helps us win elections, then it's something we'll grin and bear it. So that's my takes on that. But the real feminist problem is the conservative femcells, not Mace types. Okay, going forward, let's see who else we've got. We've got Appalachian. So his question is, do you think Trump will limit legal immigration? I saw a post from Trudeau saying he will be limiting legal immigration for Canada. Well, his administration will do that by creating stiffer regulations and rules, making it harder for people to get green cards or to settle in this country, which they were doing in this last 2 years of Trump. They're going to bring back those rules and regulations, making it harder. You know, if they're probably going to bring back the public charge rule that if you are likely to be on welfare or any type of government assistance, you're not going to get a green card. So you will see and they probably will limit cut down on refugee intake and certainly asylum intake. Those all contribute to limiting legal immigration. So the numbers will come down, but in terms of like legislation passing limiting legal immigration, that's not going to happen. Congress will never pass it. Not at this time. Now, maybe in 2030s they could do this. I mean, there needs to be another like paradigm shift for that to go forward. I think he will only be able to do that through executive action. So you will see the legal immigration numbers go down. I don't think as much as we'd like, but as much as you can hope for simply through executive action. And he did this in his first term. You know, legal immigration numbers came down sizably in his first term, and that will happen again in his second term as well. So yeah, but I don't think it'll be as much as we'd like. That's my answer to that. Second question from Appalachian. He says, do you think there is a chance in the next 10 years of Russia breaking ties with China if the U.S. navigates Russian foreign policy well enough? I think Putin's ideology is purely an anti-West, anti-U.S. ideology that is neither communist, traditionalist, religious, or anything it claims to be. With China paying them pennies for oils as one of their customers and China price gouging them on the goods Russia has to buy, do you think Russia could get fed up enough and seek a ceasefire, loose allyship with the U.S. against China in the future? It would never be with us. America, I've kind of pointed this out. Some people got mad about this, but America and U.S. are always going to be rivals and never going to have good relations. You know, some of this extends back to, you know, our founding. A thing that got a lot of people to join the Patriot side was the rumor that the British were going to use Russian mercenaries against us. And Russia stood as this barbaric tyranny, semi-civilized, not a part of the West in the Western imagination in the 18th century. They hated Russia because they they're like, they have the absolutist czar. It's completely backwards. They have this strange religion. We do not like Russia, and that continued on to the 19th century. I mean, probably the best relations we ever had with Russia was them selling us Alaska for cheap, and also Russia backed. Was one of the few Western powers to fully back the Union during the Civil War. And they did this solely because they thought the British, which were their enemies, and also, which was their main enemy, and also the French, which they had fought both of them in the Crimean War that just ended a few years prior to the Civil War, were on the side of the Confederacy. And so they also felt that if the Confederacy wins, that would be a big victory for Britain, which was their primary geopolitical enemy, so they sided with the Union. They supported the Union. But since that, we've never had a good relations. I mean, the Tsarist Empire, Americans deeply hated. They did not like the Tsars. America wasn't really into it, and then the Soviet Union never really liked the Soviet Union except for a brief period of time from 41 to 45, and yeah, we're probably never going to get along. It's anti-Russia is built too much into the U.S. structure, I guess is a way to put it, or how we conduct foreign policy, and you have limits of how you can change your foreign policy because how Russia conducts its geopolitics and its global strategy has not deferred that much over the last, no matter the regime they've had. I mean, they've had 3 different governments over the last 110 years, but they. They still have had a largely similar foreign policy and ambitions of, an influencing of where they have different, some countries they've historically had bad relations with that they now have good relations with, like Iran, but they're drawn into being allies with Iran because of their shared enemy in the United States. So I don't see that. Now, breaking free of China, yes, I could see this. And this would happen if the war ends in Ukraine and then Europe returns to a friendly relationship with Russia, and their ties with Europe strengthen against American opposition, against what America would wish, and they can rely more on Europe to make up for the ties that they have with China. And this is another country that they've historically not had good ties with. You could say, like, well, they've had bad ties with China and Iran, but it's just different. It's just different from with America. I don't think America is ever going to have good ties with it, with Russia, even in an anti-China alliance. The foreign policy establishment views Russia just as big of a problem as China, but I do think Russia can move away from its dependency on China if normalization relations occur with Europe and they're able to tighten those relations with Western Europe. And that could happen within this decade. So that would be my answer to it. But I think America and Russia will have tense relations for as long as Putin is alive, as long as Putin is president. And whoever succeeds him will probably still be Putin-esque. And, maybe 20 years down the line, somebody's completely different from Putin and maybe we're able to have good ties. But even then, even when Boris Yeltsin was at our beck and call in the 90s, we still wanted a weak Russia. We still wanted to run roughshod over Russia. A weak Russia is central to U.S. global strategy. And only a Boris Yeltsin would want that. No Russia leader is going to have a popular mandate on his people by making their country weak. So I think there's always going to be problems with that. I could be wrong, so I don't want to say I'm very confident in this, but that's my take on that. I don't think the China-Russia bond is inseparable, but I do think the hostility, or the tension rather, between U.S. and Russia is going to remain for the time being. Now from IPA Enjoyer, he's got a quick question regarding Elon Vivek's DOGE initiative. Which areas do you think are in most need of Elon's cost-cutting wizardry? I know we had highly respected or no budget halts, but I think this is an exciting prospect to shrink federal bloat. For example, J.D. Vance talked about reforming the defense acquisition process here. We'll love to hear some of your proposals as well. Well, I know I don't want to offer black pills about the administration, but DOGE is going to be mostly a joke. And what they're going to do with cost cutting, it's mostly going to be research grants that they talk about on their podcast with Marjorie Taylor Greene, and it's going to be they're spending $3 million to study worm cancer. We're cutting this out, and so they're going to mostly be cutting research grants and also figuring out how Elon can get more government funding for his companies and stuff. The biggest thing is they're going to recommend that government workers return to the office. That's probably a good thing. A lot of them firing government workers, they're going to come up against, laws and regulations that is beyond the scope that DOGE will not have the power over. Now they can highlight a lot of the problems with it, but in terms of like cost cutting and other things, some of that's going to come up with the budget and other things. So they're going to really just target stuff that's easiest cut, and probably research grants is going to be the easiest thing to cut. And it will please conservative audiences when they highlight how, they spent $3 million studying worm cancer and what's the utility in that. And they'll cut that, and that will probably be it. I mean, it would be nice if they reformed defense acquisition process, because that is extremely expensive. But some of that is built in by laws and regulations. And also a lot of the expense is due to civil rights laws about how they have to hire, minority-owned businesses and stuff like that. And that's beyond the purview of DOGE. So, I mean, I like the idea in theory, but expecting it to do a lot, I don't think so. There's a lot they could potentially do to shrink federal government bloat. But I would probably take an authoritarian, a true authoritarian that just got rid of like normal laws and regulations that are dictating this, and then they could cut down on this stuff. But I think a lot of what DOGE would try to do, it will please like conservative audiences. They'll be so excited, and Elon will force Twitter users to celebrate it, so it'll be fine. I mean, it's not the worst thing in the world, but it's not going to be that effective or efficient, as we could say. So that is my answer to IPA enjoyer. We've got some more questions coming up. We will go with Jersey Guy. Jersey Guy asked, can you discuss the rise of SEC schools, not just related to sports, in terms of their popularity with American youth? Although my children are still young, I've spoken with numerous neighbors and colleagues with high school age children, and almost all their kids want to go down south to an SEC school. When I was in high school here in New Jersey 20 years ago, I can't think of one person from my graduating class who went to an SEC school. Also, outside of Vanderbilt, do you see any schools becoming elite institutions over the next decade? The whole reason of them going to SEC schools is they are now the preeminent party schools. They're seen as fun. And a lot of it is these TikTok trends of these sororities doing dances and Rush Week. And everyone thinks like SEC is where it's at. It's also the growing popularity of country music and Southern culture in this. Like everyone loves like cowboy boots and cowboy hats, and they're like, I want to go down south and I can wear my cowboy hat and listen to Morgan Wallen and stuff. And this is where all the fun's to be had. In some ways, it's red leaning. It's a positive trend, because even though this stuff isn't explicitly political, going to an SEC school is conservative coded, even though they may not themselves be conservative coded. It is them wanting to. It is a type of celebrating whiteness, because they're going to SEC schools because of the whiteness on display and the fun that is there, and it's all these good-looking blonde people having a great time watching sports. And also the SEC schools are the top college football programs, and they want to go enjoy the tailgating and all that stuff. And so it's connected entirely to they want to have a fun college experience, and SEC schools are the best at advertising that. Because that's what most college kids are thinking about a lot of college kids are thinking about is, what is the best party schools to go to? And at the top are SEC schools, while the northern schools are not seen as party schools. And they don't advertise themselves that well. It's not like Michigan Rush Week is a huge TikTok trend. It's Bama Rush Week. So it is interesting. And it's also part that there's, it is a decline in the type of regionalism in America. Everyone's like, we're going to return to our strong regional identities. And being from the South, you're basically from a different country than New Jersey. But the fact that like all these people from New Jersey are moving to the South or going to school in the South or everywhere else, it's like, yeah, no, we're more mixed up and homogenized country than ever before. So, you know, a lot of people don't want to believe that, but that is, you can see that in the popularity of SEC schools. Now, about them, any of them turning elite? No, none of them are becoming. I mean, Alabama is, I think, more of a respectable institution than it was when I was, graduating high school. I think that's a large part due to how dominant their football team is and the fact that the entire country now wants to go there as a top, like, fun school. But in terms of like a Vanderbilt, no, it's not going to be there. Florida and Georgia are very, good elite institutions, but most of the SEC is not very good. Like it's harder to get into UT now, Tennessee, not Texas. Well, it's harder to get into Texas too. But whenever my UT is Tennessee, it's Tennessee because I grew up there. It's a lot harder to get into UT, but UT is not considered like that great of a school. But it's like the only decent public university in Tennessee, and Tennessee is having tons of people move to Nashville. And if you're graduating from a Nashville, suburban high school, and you want to go to school cheap, your only option is UT. But it's not that, it's hard to get into because everywhere else in the state is, but it's not considered that elite institution. Florida and Georgia still have a higher reputation and prestige than UT does. So I don't think any of them are going to be turning into elite institutions. It's always going to be Vanderbilt and others. And even from what I know about DC school kids, like the ones who go to SEC schools like Ole Miss and Alabama, it's a sign that they were not smart enough to get into the elite schools. So there is that issue with that. But it's okay. I mean, the flagship state universities are still going to be conservative, affordable to go to, not that bad. You'll have a fun experience. So whenever people are acting like you're going to have to go to school for $100K and not learn anything and only be working at Starbucks, now you can still go to a flagship state school, find like-minded conservative people and have a great time and develop yourself. And so I think it's mostly a positive thing that more American youth want to go to SEC schools, and it is declining wokeness. Because the reason why they want to go to these schools is not for, gender studies and to be blue haired and to question what, their gender is. It's to go there and dress up nice and post Instagram photos with other blonde haired women. So I guess I think it's mostly a good thing. Celebrating whiteness. We got to like that. So we've got Jersey guy question. We got questions from Preston. Preston asks, YouTuber Morgoth's review recently said in a video that the UK is in a way becoming the North Korea of woke, in which he meant that while the rest of Western Europe and Anglosphere are leaning more into a sort of center-right nationalism in their politics that seeks to bring back the 80s, 90s, 2000s consensus and to keep the woke 2014-2021 era behind, the UK is not going in the same direction. This is not to say that every other country is electing right-wing leaders, but even Macron's stance seems to see itself in a more idealized way than UK, which still seems stuck in the past. The recent Weird Jaguar ad seems to be an example of this. Not saying that British people are more woke than contemporary countries, but it seems like they're still hashing this out while other countries are moving on. Do you think there is any truth to this? I think so, because I think it's due to their political system. It's unlike others which have proportional representation. France is not, but other countries have proportional representation. So if AfD gets 20% in national parliamentary elections, they get 20% of the seats. But in the UK, where Reform Party did well, they only got like 4 seats. I think maybe even 3. And the Conservative Party, it's essentially a 2-party system with a minor third party in the Lib Dems, and that's that. And the Conservatives also have greater control. It's the worst system you could possibly imagine, because like a lot of these European countries, the parties have complete control. The party leadership has complete control over the party, which is different from Republicans. Like Republicans, the party establishment may pick someone, and then someone challenges them, and the challenger wins. We have primaries. There's no primaries in this system. Party leadership picks someone, that's the candidate. End of story. That's the candidate. There's, they pick who are the leaders, they pick the agenda. It's all set by the leadership. And that prevents like grassroots activists from having much say. And in France, or in other countries, if you just don't like the party leadership, you can start your own third party and you can compete against them, which is happening in France, Germany, Netherlands, Sweden, Austria, elsewhere. UK, you pretty much just have the conservatives. Now, Reform is making inroads, but it's possibly not enough to offset to overthrow the conservatives. So it's a lot due to their political system they have that rewards essentially what's a two-party system, and it's a worse two-party system than what we have in America. And in America, you have the ability to make the Republican Party a lot better. Grassroots activists have that ability. And also we have conservative media here, which the UK, their tabloids are conservative media, but Daily Mail will have like the most racist articles imaginable. And then they'll be like, oh my God, Boris Johnson says he doesn't like immigration. How dare he? So they'll like, you'll read one article that's like much more racial than any type of article you read even in the New York Post. And then the next article will be talking about how the conservatives are like racist or something. So it's like a weird schizo attitude that you're seeing from Daily Mail. I think their media situation is worse, and just a political system is worse. And also they eliminated themselves from and one way that was helping third parties was EU elections, is that these third parties like the UKIP could establish themselves as serious parties by getting people elected to the EU, and that would help them establish themselves as a reasonable alternative. But they now no longer have that because EU is proportional representation. So yeah, it's really structural disadvantages that the British have. But I think the English themselves are a lot better than other Europeans. I think that the English, note English, not British, because Scottish are really bad. I don't know how bad the Welsh are, but the Scottish are really bad. I mean, the Scottish Nationalist Party is insanely left wing. They were led by a Pakistani Muslim. Like, come on, man. But the English and the Northern Irish, or the Ulstermen, are really right wing, and I think they're better than like Germans, I think, and like they're more right wing, more aware of these issues. But due to the structural problems that they have and the way Britain is structured politically, it's much harder for them to argue for their own positions. They also have the problem of Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland increasingly, even though the DUP there is really right-wing. DUP is way better than Conservatives, but the Irish Catholics are now outweighing them, and they're all voting Sinn Féin, which is a terrible left-wing party. So there's a lot going on there. I think there is some case to that. But we'll have to see in the future. Europe is moving in a better direction, but the UK is not. So I would largely agree with that statement. A second question, he said, I saw this tweet by Moldova and future Moldovan citizen about Borat, in which he said Borat was funny in 2006 because anti-Semitism didn't exist in 2006. So a guy talking about throwing the Jew down the well was just seen as absurdist. In 2024, it comes across more as straight up ethnic activism with a thin pretense of humor, which is what it always was. Do you agree? And what do you think of Borat and Sacha Baron movies in general? Oh, yeah, no, I totally agree. They're actually deeply evil movies because they're all about like attacking the white majority of these countries and thinking them as bad and mocking them. And this has always been his mission in all of his movies, is about shocking and attacking either whether it's white Americans or white British and thinking them as bad and then mocking them and then taking this high moral tone when something is threatened. Like, this guy made his whole career over like the most vulgar comedy imaginable, and he also tricked a lot of people into doing these interviews. Like, the most famous thing is Borat, where he's interviewing these guys. I think they're from a South Carolina fraternity, and they're just like traveling. I think they're traveling a football game, and they got like a trailer, and he's interviewing them in an RV, and he got them wasted, and then he basically encouraged them to be racist, and then they ruined their lives by Borat tricking them into this. And he's done this constantly. There was this clip that people really liked where he found like not the brightest local lawmaker. I think he was like from Georgia, and he got him to do defense training. And he was like, I think he was like claiming he was like an Israeli defense expert, and he made this guy look like a moron, and he just like tricks people. Only person that didn't fall for it was like, Donald Trump. But he's just like a deeply evil person. I really don't like that, where he takes in he abuses people's trust and people's openness to talking to him, and he uses it to skewer them and to attack them. Because none of these people he's going after, it's like they're not aware of this. They're like, oh, this is an interesting person from a foreign country who wants to talk to me. I'll talk to him. And then he manipulates them into being the caricature he wants them to be. And it's done to spread a very insidious message. So no, Sacha Baron Cohen movies are some of the most evil movies that have ever been produced. The fact that Borat's popularity, I think it is true that it was absurdist. Like, and the funny thing is, it almost made people open to more anti-Semitic jokes, because when I was in high school, everyone thought that shit was funny, and they were not thinking like, oh, we need to question anti-Semitism. Then instead, like thinking this is hilarious, and then they're laughing at it, which was not Sacha Baron Cohen's intent. Which that intent would be clearer now than it is in 2006. So I fully agree with that take from Moldovan. But no, the movies in hindsight are deeply, deeply evil. I do have a funny story about seeing his movie about Bruno, which was this Austrian character who was like gay, and the whole movie was about assaulting the homophobia of Americans. And there's like a clip in the movie where there's like a swinging dick or something. And I remember seeing it in the theaters, and like all these people began walking out because they're just like, this is disgusting. And the movie, and it was done to attack like middle American norms and values that they held dear. And then this guy, and whenever Sacha Baron Cohen then comes out as morally pure, like, you deserve lessons from me, it's like, look at your fucking movies now. Yeah, I agree. I fully agree with Moldovan's take. Okay, we're gonna go along to, I think we got 2 more questions. Always having anything that I don't answer, we got saved for the mailbag. We'll have housekeeping at the end on mailbag. What's going to be happening with the mailbag this week? I think Flores actually had another question. Actually, we have 3 questions. Scott, he's like saying, Scott, could there ever be a right-wing slippery slope? I.e., could achieving a small victory and getting trans folk banned from women's bathrooms and sports slide into public souring over trans stuff in general, and eventually snowballing after that to public disdain for gay marriage becoming socially acceptable again? Would this be possible? I could see this happening on a small scale with the base, but not very much for the general normie population. Some people have been claiming that there's now a backlash against gay marriage due to trans stuff. I think it was like one poll that showed some decline in support for gay marriage, but no, there's way more gay acceptance than there was. This is a change. There's way more gay acceptance than there was in 2013. But trans stuff, there is less acceptance of it than there was in 2019. There has been a full-scale trans backlash, but I don't think it's quite had the slippery slope into being anti-gay marriage. I think that's the case among conservatives online, that due to the trans stuff they've now become more anti-gay, but I don't know. I don't think this is translating in the real world. Now, it could happen. I think it's possible, and we have seen a kind of a slippery slope with the trans issue that opposing them in sports has then led a whole backlash to them in general. So we'd have to see. That's from Flores. Now we got, of course, Mish House. We've got another person, so don't worry. He has two questions. He's got a really great question. Do you like the Village People's music? Obviously, I know they're gay, because I wasn't born yesterday, but it's mostly subtle enough to not bother me. Even the actual Navy didn't catch on, and I just like the sound of disco in general. Should I be arrested and executed for this? No, I think it's fine. I mean, I don't like disco, and if I was seriously analyzing Village People's music, I would not like it. But you're not supposed to seriously analyze Village People's music. I now associate it with Trump, now with gay culture, and so that makes it cool and funny. It's a goofy music. To be like, I hate the Village People, you're like, really? That's a little weird. But now that it's associated with Trump, you can say it's awesome music. It's now fully right wing music. We've got Wagner, we've got black metal, we've got neo folk, we've got synthwave, and now we've got the Village People joining up. But I'm not really a disco fan. I like Giorgio Moroder's. I'm butchering his last name. I like some of his stuff, but no, I don't really like disco. And on an intellectual level, I think disco is bad and was very much opposed by our type of people at the time who thought it was gay and multiracial. And there's this famous incident that I should do an IQ supplement on. They had a riot at a Chicago, it was a White Sox game, where they had disco demolition night, and they burned all these records, and then there was a full-on riot from these rock fans who were all working class whites and like AC/DC t-shirts. So disco would probably do more of IQ supplement on that, on the disco moment. And second question, why do you think the pretendian phenomenon not only exists but has seemingly spread to the rest of the Anglosphere? The concrete material benefits to claiming Indian heritage are null, especially when almost nobody actually believes you. So even the affirmative action explanation doesn't really survive scrutiny. I also want to shout out to white South Africans for being keen enough to be repulsed by the idea of having remote African blood even when they actually do. Well, the Afrikaners have a strong ethnic identity and strong group identity, which a lot of the Anglos don't. And also, black Africans are never going to believe that they're like, they have a different code. It's like one drop of white blood makes you white for like black majority there. While here, it's like the old, like one drop of black blood made you black. So it's the same with the Afrikaners. Yeah, no, they operate differently, and also they built up a regime that was on the basis of them being pure white when they were not quite so like that. Now, for the Anglosphere, no, it is the material benefits. I think you deny that. They absolutely do have material benefits, especially in Australia, is that they have a type of affirmative action for Aborigines. And all these white people are like, hey, I'm Aborigine. And then they're like, you are clearly not Aborigine, Mr. Blonde-haired, blue-eyed man. And there is definitely there's material and social benefits from this. One, whites want to say that there's something else besides white. And also Elizabeth Warren had a career thanks to pretending she's an Indian. You absolutely gain benefits by being Indian materially, by getting jobs and contracts that you wouldn't otherwise do. If you want to be, have the benefits of being a minority-owned business, you can just say, oh, I'm Indian. And then you can get that. And it's the same with applying to college and other things. There's absolutely a lot of material benefits for that. But it's also moral benefits, is that they want to be different from white. And it'll be like even white Americans who are like Irish, who will be like, I'm not white, I'm Irish. And it's like, you are absolutely white. Like, you're an idiot for claiming this. In Anglo society, they all want to pretend that there's something besides being white. So then they'll just like, oh, I'm Indian. And there's that. And also there's this, culturally, we view Indians as morally superior to whites. Like, I had one kid in elementary school who would claim he has Indian heritage, and then he would just claim that, like, oh, we understand things more than whites, and it makes me better than whites, more in tune with nature and shit like that. And it's like, whites want that type of identity. They want something they don't have to feel guilty for. And so thinking that they're Indian is cool in our culture and that, but they also gain material benefits for it. They do get affirmative action benefits for it, especially in Australia. So that would be my answer for that. That is also a question potentially worth its own IQ supplement. I wonder if there's any books. There's probably some books and academic articles about that I could do a whole podcast on. And now we have our final question from Mr. Sharecrop. Sharecrop said, I did not answer a question. I think I might have, but I think it would have been for an IQ supplement, so I can answer this question now. He says, hey, Scott, do you think Trump will be able to force states to fix their election system? Constitutionally, state legislatures have the authority to make the laws for running their own elections, but is there a mechanism that can be used to make them follow certain standards? I think getting a secure system for submitting and counting votes is very popular, and the GOP must have been aware of the issue since 2020, but it seems like not much meaningful progress has been made anywhere. The only thing I saw this election was a few legal battles to ensure GOP vote watchers had access to the rooms. Now we see both Blue Anon and Q Boomers saying that there was various forms of cheating. No, he really doesn't have the ability to do that, and I think we should be skeptical of that, because anytime the national government comes down on election systems, it favors the left. And I think it's good for us that it remains in the hands of states and local localities. The best thing we can do is get people elected to state legislatures so they can implement voter ID laws and cut down on mail-in ballots. That is the most important thing we can do. We need to get Republicans to take over in Wisconsin. Well, they took over the legislature, but they needed the governorship. We need Republicans to take over in Michigan. We need Republicans to take over in Pennsylvania. And we need Republicans to take over the governorship in Arizona and in Nevada and implement these laws like they did in Georgia. Georgia passing its election reform laws in 2021 ensured Trump won in 2024. And if more states follow that model, Republicans will do much better in elections. But you have to leave it to the states, because creating a precedent where the president and the national federal government can just determine election policies, that's giving liberals ammunition to set nationwide policies, which they tried to do with the John Lewis Act following Biden's, assuming office, which they would have allowed drop boxes and the loosest mail-in ballot rules possible. So that would be terrible. Yeah, I think just letting it to the states. You don't want to step on their toes, because respecting states' prerogative over that helps us legally challenge, if God forbid the liberals ever have a supermajority in the national level, and then they impose the John Lewis Act on these states, we can then challenge it in court and potentially get it overthrown by saying it's unconstitutional. They're not going to have enough votes to make it an amendment, so I think it could still be overthrown in the courts. So we have one final question. I almost forgot about it. It's from Dave. Dave asks, I haven't seen anyone else talk about it. What are the implications of South Carolina being the first primary state? We haven't seen that play out yet, but with the shift of working class towards the GOP and the rejection of identity politics, how does this play out for Dems? Both in how candidates will have to campaign and pander, and any early momentum for black candidates. Is this a potential issue for Dems? Oh, it's gonna cripple their Bernie Sanders wing. That's for sure. It'll also, they'll all spend all their time courting the CBC, a Congressional Black Caucus, and like Clyburn. Well, Clyburn might not be around for 2028, but whoever his successor is, and trying to get their endorsement. It's going to be all about centered on black voters, which it's not going to help the type of Bernie types that are going to want to challenge the Democratic establishment. It's definitely going to favor more of the Democratic establishment, but it's also going to force them to make a lot of concessions to the black constituency that would potentially hurt them in general elections. Maybe blacks decide they really want reparations. And if all these Democrats are banking on winning South Carolina, they're going to have to entertain reparations, which is going to hurt them in a general election. And it's also not going to center much on economic issues. It's all going to be centered on how much you will personally dole out to the black community. So it's definitely going to favor the establishment, 100%. And whoever can win over most black voters and are really black leaders, and it'll favor them. Now, there may be a strategy where the next states would favor more economic populists, but I think it's also going to harm people like Bernie Sanders and those types to make a big splash because they had much better territory to spread their message in very white New Hampshire and Iowa. And now with dealing with South Carolina, Bernie always did terribly there. So if AOC does try to run, or some type of successor to Bernie tries to run, they're going to really have to double down on identity politics to outmaneuver the centrists. So that could potentially lead to an American Chavist getting the nomination in 2028 if South Carolina surprisingly goes for that person and they feel that they are more likely to reward black voters. But I mean, black voters, it's just determined by their leaders. You know, a lot of their leaders are not going to be like, oh yeah, we're going to back AOC. No, they're going to back whoever they view as the establishing guy, and whoever they support, their community supports. Like, their endorsements matter a lot more than the endorsements of ordinary politicians, because then they tell their churches and local workers who their people are voting for, and that's the result. So that is my answer to that question, and that is it for Highly Respected this week. We got a little bit of different schedule this week due to the holiday. We're going to only have one article this week. Thanksgiving, we're going to have the day off. Enjoy your turkey. Wednesday, different mailbag. The answers will be written form. It will not be a podcast. It'll be written form. Friday, we'll still have an IQ supplement. So only one column this week. Not a mailbag podcast, but written answers. So keep on the lookout for that. So still great content coming in the future that you'll have to be on the lookout for. So until next time, stay respected.